Hello and welcome to another episode of Top Shot, a program in which we talk to a very prominent personality on an issue concerning you and me. The issues which actually influence yours and my life on a day-to-day basis. So today I am very happy to welcome Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, one of the most distinguished person in civil service, in political life, in social life, in public life, and I would say a very good human being. So Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, welcome to this program. And in fact, thank you very much for coming all the way just to be part of this program to take your message to the people.
The pleasure is mine, Sureshji.
Actually, tell me something, Doctor. You have been, you work for the government of India, government actually. You are in Indian Administrative Service. You're a very prominent officer. Today you could have been a secretary of the government of India. Could have lived a very cozy life. You could have continued to enjoy the tappings of power. You resigned all that and just decided to start a movement to create awareness about what is going wrong in the society. Why did you do that?
Sureshji, in many ways, I'm a child of emergency. Those are the formative years of my life, as was the case with millions of Indians at that time. We were all troubled by the way civil liberties were suspended. India was converted into some kind of a large jail in a liberal society. The constitution became inconsequential. And of course, the shame of the habeas corpus case judgment in the Supreme Court, we all remember even today. So from that agony and the disappointment of the failure of the Janata experiment came the decision to join the government at the time. I was really clueless as to what to do as a citizen because I'm a medical doctor by training. And then somebody suggested why don't you join the civil services. So I didn't really join government for a career. It was even then a bit of a mission, trying to do something about liberty in the country, opportunity, justice and dignity. I've had a wonderful time in government. I'm one of the very happy civil servants, unlike many who would revile the bureaucracy or are deeply dispirited about government work. I had a wonderful time, whichever be the party in power. But I could clearly see the experience in government taught me that no matter where you are placed, let alone a piddly civil servant, civil servants are not that important as we all believe in this country, but even the political executive, be it a chief minister or a cabinet minister, you are one, and a very distinguished one at that, or a prime minister, your capacity to deliver is very severely constrained by the limitations imposed on the system. On a scale of 100, the best of us can deliver no more than 15 or 20. And unless you look at the larger systemic issues and ensure that there is a better outcome for the citizens, all our trappings of power mean nothing. And once I understood that it's only a question of time. It's not whether, it's when. So when I felt I was ready, I left government after 16 years. And, well, it's the same work really, without a monthly wage. Yeah. I don't think there's any serious difference.
But, Jayaprakash, actually, you were very pained by emergency because the civil rights of the people were affected and people were not able to express their democratic rights of expression and organization and things like this. But tell me, do you think that when there is no emergency, when we have the type of political party that we all operate in, do you think they really promote democracy, the type of democracy that each of us would like it to have, or is it something which is actually still the type of system that we operate in actually helps us not to realize the true potential of democratic freedom?
It's an excellent question, Sureshji. On my way here on board the aircraft, I was going through one of the recent magazines in which Justice Jagmohan Lal Sinha's life was celebrated. No, he died only last month. In fact, in the last month, a month and a half, we lost two of our greatest jurists of all time, Justice H.R. Khanna and Jagmohan Lal Sinha, who was the man who delivered that famous judgment of June the 12th, 1975, the Allahabad High Court. So he quoted Justice Sinha in this a few years ago when he said, look, in those days there was emergency. Liberties were taken away. Today the same things are happening without declaration of emergency. Liberty has become illusory. In a notional sense, normative sense, of course, all of us have liberty. I can speak my mind here in the august presence of Lok Sabha. on a Lok Sabha sponsored television, which is a remarkable thing. It's a tribute to our democracy and constitution. And yet, real liberty is not available to the bulk of the people because there's no opportunity, there's no education, health care, and of course the rule of law is really in shambles in this country. There are many things that are clearly wrong. But I don't think we should be too despondent about that. As a lifelong fighter for democratic values, I recognize the value of the freedoms that we enjoy. That must be the starting point.
Yeah.
Many of us revile democracy to the point that we hate politics, we hate our constitution, we think everything is wrong. That's an extremely short-sighted view of history. All countries in the world had similar problems, and they have their own ways of coping with those problems and transforming societies. And we are facing some very complex challenges. Certainly, dignity and justice and even liberty to some extent are denied to the bulk of the people of this country. And the political process, while at a larger level, politics is very sound. We have competitive elections, we have political freedoms. The winners do not punish losers, unlike in many other countries in our neighborhood. If somebody is in power, somebody else is beheaded or something.
Yeah.
And the elected government is truly in power. It's not a coterie or a military junta. These are all great things. Myron Weiner talked about these 4 postulates of a functioning democracy. By those yardsticks, certainly Indian democracy is a very vibrant and live democracy. But if we go deeper, obviously there are many serious problems, and 3 of them in particular that should trouble all of us today. One is politics has become commerce. It's become like private property for the bulk of the people. There are, of course, outstanding individuals. Dr. Manmohan Singh's personal integrity is beyond question. Lok Sabha Speaker Mr. Somnath Chatterjee is a man who has dedicated his life for a cause. You were an exceptional cabinet minister who, if I may say so, were actually thrown out by the system because of your integrity. A notorious case where a minister is not allowed to function because he is too honest, which is absurd. That's become the norm today, that if you are too honest in a key ministry, you cannot function, kind of a thing. And of course, because politics and power are taken as private property, this whole inheritance and dynastic tendencies at one level. The second large issue is divide the society and rule. We complain against the British all the time.
Yeah.
But I think we are doing a much better job of dividing and ruling. Caste, creed, region, religion, language. By 100 means, we use these identity politics and create voting blocks, and then destroy the idea of India, which is, to my mind, one of the greatest dangers in contemporary India. Yeah. Even as economically the country is getting integrated and there's a globalized economy and society, within the country we are now creating so many fissures. And of course the third is the politics of SOPs. You give huge loan waivers without a rationale. You give some SOPs. All these are necessary. In a poor society, you have to help the underdog. But for the time being, the real help is to help them help themselves. Yeah. To make them stand on their own feet, to enhance the capacities, to give education, health care, and to look at skills. And that seems to be...
Don't give him a fish, but tell him how to fish.
Exactly. So that does not seem to be the popular thing in India. It's amazing that in a country where our health care is in shambles, our education in public domain is non-existent, these are not the central issues of politics. Yeah. I mean, I'm utterly shocked. There are very few countries in the world where health care is as bad as in India. Public health system is as utterly decrepit as in India. The only 3 countries that come to my mind are Afghanistan, Burma, and Cambodia, the ABC countries. And that we are in that company, not even sub-Saharan Africa is as bad as India, is an amazing fact. And yet, somehow the political system is oblivious to it. Yeah. So there are some serious things wrong, but I believe we as a people have the capacity, we have the resources, and we are lucky to live in this time and age when big things can happen in a relatively short time.
Yeah. But Jayaprakash, just listening to you now, it just comes to my mind that you are a civil servant, but typically once you cease to be a civil servant, you criticize the civil service. That's what has become a norm now. You are in politics in a way, but actually an extension of your social commitment. But again, you are not critical of politicians. You feel that we should not belittle the politician. How you can avoid this bitterness, and you don't want to score point by just belittling others? How did that happen? Because this has become a very good
national pastime.
That's right, unfortunately.
Yes. I remember in 1991 or thereabout, I prepared a document as part of civil service training. I was in the Administrative Staff College in Hyderabad for a week. I used that short sabbatical as an opportunity to look at the reform processes required in the country, in judiciary, in civil services, in a variety of governance sectors. That was, of course, much talked about, and some of the distinguished Indians today were there during that training program with me. They were very senior to me in government. One thing that struck me was, whenever I made that presentation to a group of people, they all said, in general, it's wonderful, the diagnosis is right, the prescriptions are good, the answers, the analysis is very sound, the solutions are very practical, etc. And each of them said, when it came to civil servants, they said, look, all things are wonderful, the political reform, judicial reform, etc., but civil services, no, you're too radical. The judges said, no, everything is wonderful, but judiciary, no, you're too radical. The politicians said the same nice things about others, but political reform, no, it's too radical. So reform is for somebody else. Yeah. We are a very strange country at this point of time. There are two things which are prevalent. One is we have a system of alibis. Yeah. We all have wonderful alibis for our own inaction or bad actions. But we don't really grant the same kind of allowance. We don't have the charity in our minds about the other people and their limitations. And the second is that we believe that everybody else is bad, yeah, and we are good. And therefore, our abdication is perfectly justified, because what can we do? I'm alone, yeah, which is nonsensical. The bulk of the people actually want the changes, yeah, including the crooks in government, yeah, including the corrupt ones and the criminals. Yeah. And each of them is actually a victim of a vicious cycle. Yeah. Each of them in his own mind is a great hero and fighting it out in his own way, etc. So I think we really are lucky in this time and age. I honestly, truly believe that this generation has the privilege to be able to say that we have the resources and the knowledge and the solutions to be able to make life much better for all of us together. And if you don't have a sense of optimism and good cheer, and if you don't recognize that there is a balance required among various organs of state, between society and state, between citizens and government, then it's not a very holistic approach to life. You become a part of the problem.
Well, you just mentioned that you're a medical doctor. I didn't know that. So what's your specialization in that?
I did not specialize, because by the time I finished my medical school...
But you're talking like a surgeon, surgically actually dissecting a problem, and at the same time, you are taking a real medical doctor's view of looking at the issues very objectively. Now, tell me something, you just mentioned about this very important issue of politics. Whether we like it or not, in India, everything is actually influenced by politics. At the same time, politicians, and I being one of them, we don't want to change the way the politics is carried out, because we think that's the only way it can happen, because we don't have time to sit back and actually come out with a set of changes that are required to be done. So you now have converted Lok Sabha organization to political movement. How the transition took place from people's movement? I think Lok Sabha stands for people's power.
People power.
So from there to a people's movement, then to now political party. How this transition took place?
In fact, when I left government, we started with actually a document. It was not really a typical Indian organization in search of a mission. It was a very clearly defined mission that informed our actions. We wanted the following reforms in the political domain and governance of India, whether it's judiciary, police, the political system, the political parties, etc., electoral system, decentralization of power, and of course fight against corruption, transparency and accountability, etc. Very clearly defined, well articulated. You may or may not agree with the answers, with the solutions and the goals, but the broader analysis is based on facts and evidence and logic.
All issues together.
The governance issues of India, the politics and governance of India. And in order to pursue that, we realized that we needed three things. We needed a capacity to try and look at issues honestly, based on evidence, not merely some quixotic and impulsive kind of an approach, and therefore some serious think tank kind of work. B, we require to mobilize people. Unless the citizens are galvanized into action, unless they understand the issues, not emotively, not with hatred and bigotry, but with a lot of good sense, with a lot of wisdom and understanding the limitations of the state and the potential of the citizens, but mobilize them in a very constitutional and moral way. In India, somehow, mobilization means rasta roko and band and go and beat up some people and indulge in violence and face bullets, which is nonsensical in a constitutional democracy.
And just for time being, then again it peters out, nothing happens after that.
And it's very dangerous, because then that means you have sown the seeds of anarchy. Yeah. Nobody can govern. Yeah. And this simply is not on. In a constitutional democracy, I am firmly of the view that our liberties must recognize the other people's liberties. We all know that, and yet we don't practice it. Parties think it's their birthright to indulge in this kind of vandalism and violence. I think it's simply not on. In a libertarian society, in a liberal society, when there are organs of state and there are constitutional liberties protected and there are constitutional authorities, we have no business to transgress the Constitution. So within the bounds of that, how to mobilize people.
Yeah.
And the third is, if you don't deal with the existing system,
Yeah.
you may or may not like a political party or an individual. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the office, it's the functionary that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And if you don't deal with them, the belief that each time you could bring about a revolution is nonsensical.
Yeah.
Even many established politicians have committed that mistake, believing that each election is a revolution.
Yeah.
An election is never a revolution. It gives you an immense opportunity for change.
Yeah.
And democracy ultimately is about peaceful revolution.
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that, and unless you get all the players together, unless you create incentives, find win-win solutions, and negotiate and compromise on the minor issues, but fight on the core issues, and get an answer which is acceptable to all.
War is important, not the battles.
Absolutely. So all those three we tried to combine in Lok Sabha movement. In that sense, it's a somewhat unique movement. And the results were pretty impressive. Voter registration improvements in a large measure in the country are a result of Lok Sabha's work. We started this disclosure of candidate details. We identified criminals in politics, some of the most notorious criminals, including those in this august house, unfortunately, then and now. Some of the most murderous elements in politics. And people thought that we would not live to tell the tale, but we lived, because once you do it honestly and honorably and credibly, the system will accept it. Even the murderer will come to you and say, Sureshji, you're absolutely right, but no, will it change? Nobody says, should it change?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the political funding law, an excellent law, was enacted by your government when you were in office in 2003. It was a truly good law, one of the best laws in the world, though almost no political party is utilizing that, really. Full transparency, full tax exemption to the donors, both for individuals and corporates. And all parties came together to enact that law, and Lok Sabha was very much the motivator for that. And of course, the right to information law in recent times, Aruna Roy did remarkable work, and Lok Sabha movement was deeply involved in that, and NAC gave us a forum for that. The bill right now before Parliament, you're all going to vote, hopefully in the next few days or weeks, for local courts, creating local courts in the country as an integral part of the justice system. Or liberation of cooperatives in the clutches of government, the constitutional amendment, that's again before the Parliament right now. Or the National Health Mission, and a variety of other things did come about. But once we recognized that all these are necessary but not sufficient, and unless the nature of politics, as you explained so ably, unless the way the political parties function, and unless the political platforms on offer to the people are really reflective of public opinion and the needs and the desires of the people today, nothing else really matters. Ultimately, politics is central, because politics is about promotion of human happiness. Politics is about reconciling conflicting interests in a diverse society. Politics is about matching the limited resources with unlimited wants, because nobody in this real world, except in that mythical world called heaven, will have more resources than wants. It's always a matching. And you are a builder of institutions, and banking and money. And resources must be channelized productively and creatively. And that's the function of politics. And if the political process itself is seriously distorted and dysfunctional, all these wonderful institutional things will take us to some distance, yes, but they don't change the contours of politics of India. And with that recognition, we were compelled, after a very agonizing debate, because, the typical middle class, if not revolution, I never had revolution. I always believed, and I continue to believe, that politics is a noble endeavor.
Yes,
but the distaste for getting into that very difficult thing, and the fear of failure. Let's face it, honestly, most of us pretend that we don't want to because we think that we'll fail. But if it's necessary, there's no failure. We have to do it. It has to start somewhere. And that's how this process is coming.
So you actually converted a people's movement into a people's political party now.
Not really. The people's movement continues in a form, but much of it has become the political party.
That is also an extension of that. Now tell me, for example, you have to now, as you were mentioning, this is a process which will continue for a long, long time. But if you have to prioritize in terms of real changes that India needs immediately, what are those changes that you think Lok Sabha as a political party would like to champion for?
I would say three broad areas. First is, how does a political party function?
Okay.
A party, if it functions like an autocratic, tyrannical, dictatorial body, it cannot really sustain democracy. And if a party is practicing hereditary monarchy, then the party cannot really foster democracy in the country. Therefore, the internal functioning of the party, transparency in terms of funding, in terms of membership, leadership choice, candidate choice, campaign, the way you publicly articulate your desires and your programs, and the kind of mass mobilization techniques you employ, that itself is a very important thing. In India, unfortunately, because our political parties all are influenced by the freedom struggles experience, we think obstructionism, violence, invective, abuse are perfectly acceptable. Only yesterday I received a letter from a major opposition leader in our state, a letter to the Chief Minister, and the first sentence itself is so judgmental, so harsh, so abusive, that there is no debate possible.
Yeah.
And this, in a democratic polity, when all parties are constitutional, we are all committed to the same goals, we simply have differences of perceptions, and we go to the people for their verdict ultimately. It is the bar of public opinion that matters. We don't have that perception. It is like a feudal war.
Yeah.
It's about my personal power. It's not about ideas. It's not about the people. That change itself is, to me, fundamental. It doesn't require any change of law, though some legal changes are required. The second broad area is, our whole emphasis today is on giving sops to people and pretending that you're doing something.
Yeah.
For instance, you take the 60,000 crore loan waiver. I'm a great champion of the farmers. I want to, my own personal record is one of a civil servant who did a lot for irrigation, etc. in Andhra Pradesh, is well known. But there are ways of doing it to really enhance the capacity of agriculture.
Yeah.
Or the 2 rupees rice program, or free power, or color televisions now in Karnataka. I mean, I don't understand how under the constitution it is the government's responsibility to look at the television viewing patterns of people. Other things at least you can say it's part of 7th schedule, list 1, list 2, list 3, government has to do this, but my policy is this, your policy is that, agreed.
Yeah.
But tomorrow if somebody says, I'll give you 5 bottles of liquor if you vote me to power every month, what sort of a thing is this? So is there no clarity about what the state should do and should not do? The real issue is education, healthcare. And to me, the greatest shame of India is that in the past 60 years, the Indian Republic, despite its proclamation, despite the constitutional ideals, has spectacularly failed in these 2 areas. We are one of the worst offenders in the world.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a God, Sureshji, but I certainly believe there is sin. There are 2 great sins: unfulfilled potential and avoidable suffering.
Yeah.
And India is a repository of truly vast quantities of these sins.
Yeah.
And therefore, education in the most sensible way, not merely as a slogan. Nobody denies it, but that's not the issue.
Yeah.
They must be central to politics. Yeah. The third broad goal, after education and healthcare, would be decentralization of power.
Yeah.
Today is the 15th year of the constitutional amendments, 73rd, 74th, 73rd Amendment. Well, the reality is that the amendments were a spectacular failure so far. We may say all nice things, but we didn't allow them to really take root.
Yeah.
Unless people become central to the way they govern themselves, and unless citizen is at the core of governance, even this notion of a central government, and many laws actually talk about central government, which is, I believe, unconstitutional. Citizen is central in a democracy, and then the community, then the local government, then the state, and then the federal government. There is no central government in Delhi.
Yeah.
Somehow we haven't done this. Even our language, it betrays our hierarchical notions of governance. So decentralization, I believe, those are the core.
I think, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, you are raising some very valid points, and we'll just keep debating those and talking about them for some more time. We'll just take a short break because Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, the founder of Lok Sabha movement, is actually talking to us about various issues concerning and what is ailing the political system in India and how we should try to rectify them. Don't go away, we'll come back soon. Join us soon, we'll come back. ब्रेक अच्छा ठीक है वहीं से शुरू करेंगे So doctor, we'll just come back to this on an issue that we are talking now, but we'll just come back after a break.
वहाँ से इंस्ट्रक्शन नहीं आया रोलिंग की वीटीआर रोल होना चाहिए रेडी
So sorry to interrupt you, we'll come back again because we'll just need to take a short break. This is Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan talking to us about issues concerning governance, concerning political system in India, and we'll keep talking to him on more issues concerning you and me. Don't go away, come back soon. This is a short break that we are taking in Top Shot program. This is Suresh Prabhu, welcome you back in Top Shot, in which we are talking to Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, the founder and the crusader for political rights and founder of Lok Sabha movement. Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, we are talking about various issues of how political parties should really be working in a manner that they will represent and they will be able to fulfill the people's aspiration. So one of the things that always happens is, whether we like it or not, we need political parties if you want democracy. And if you want political parties, they'll have to contest elections, they'll have to run their offices, they'll have to actually continue to incur expenditure for various activities. How do you think political parties should fund themselves? Because this becomes a very important issue, because normally people think that type of elections, people take money for the party, but it's never known whether that money is used for partying or for a real party work.
It's an excellent question, Suresh. There are two issues in this. One is the legitimate funds required for political campaigning. For that, the state must provide an opportunity either by creating incentives for funding, and I think Indian state has done a great job in 2003, I was mentioning earlier. We have one of the finest political funding laws in the world, though it is not really operated by political parties. No, there's a default there. Lok Sabha is probably the sole political party in India that's accounting for every rupee that it raises and utilizing every paisa legitimately and is fully on the website and disclosing everything, etc.
This must be the only one in the world, probably.
No, I think most countries in the world do have better systems.
In India.
In India, definitely, there's no other party, which is sad, because there's an incentive now. Our law actually provides for political funding and full tax exemption, 100% tax exemption to individuals and companies that fund political parties. Take the United States, which is a much older democracy, much more mature in some ways, and in some ways a trailblazer. Corporates are prohibited even today from funding political parties. And they find all sorts of complex ways of involving them. The soft money, hard money, etc., the political action committees, and so on and so forth. And individuals, not only is there no tax exemption, no incentive, there's actually a ceiling. Now, John McCain, who is now the Republican candidate, who was the candidate 8 years ago, one of the candidates for the nomination, he fought on the campaign finance reform plank. And despite that, they got a feeble law called Feingold-McCain law. Indian law is a remarkable improvement on that. The second part is the government can directly fund. But the problem is, public funding per se will not solve the issue. The real challenge of India is not the legitimate campaign finance requirements. Take, for instance, the current law. In most major states, as you know, 10 lakh rupees for the state assembly is the ceiling. There is some variation here and there. 25 lakh rupees for the parliament, for the Lok Sabha. Now, there is a case for increasing that amount for legitimate expenditure, but not by a huge margin. Maybe 25 instead, you are a better judge. 40, 50 for Lok Sabha is necessary for genuine campaigning. But for if it's only the campaign that's required, more money is not necessary. Particularly because the 2003 law provided for free air time in private and government electronic media. Government anyway it's utilized, but in a very boring way, dull way. Private is not utilized. The rules are not framed, though the law is in place. The parliament enacted the law. The rules are not framed. If you have television time in 2008, in this day and age, most of the campaign needs are met. The real challenge is not that. The real challenge is, and I am somewhat embarrassed and ashamed to say, that in most constituencies in India today, vote buying has become the norm. Huge amounts of money in my home state of Andhra Pradesh, for instance, typically, for an assembly constituency, 5 to 10 crore rupees, I'm not exaggerating a bit, you can ask any member of parliament from Andhra Pradesh, privately, they would confirm this, 5 to 10 crore rupees is now a perfectly acceptable figure for an assembly constituency. Parliament will be probably 3 to 4 times that.
So more expensive than US election?
Much more expensive than that. And considering the Indian rupee's real purchasing capacity and of course our income per capita, and 90% of this or more is illegitimate and unaccounted. Illegitimate because it's for distributing liquor, for money, buying the vote direct, for bribing the officials in charge of elections, for hiring hoodlums and goondas and thugs. So if that is what politics is, the funding is not the problem.
Yeah.
Incentives of power and the electoral system are the problem. Yeah. And our first past the post system has become one of the key stumbling blocks because there's a huge entry barrier. Suresh Prabhu may be a wonderfully popular person in the constituency, but if somebody else gets one more vote by means fair or foul, you're out and he's in.
That's right.
Now in that system, to get the marginal vote, there is enormous pressure. And therefore even good candidates are compelled to resort to these